we're going to go through just a quick overview on the company, why you might want to consider zero capital solutions, some of the common barriers that we run into with customers, and then the variety of zero capital solutions that you can utilize, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. So, for anyone that isn't aware, this is really what we do here at Dalkia. So, if you kind of look at this chart, we basically center everything we do around Dalkia Analytics, which is the process of metering and measurement and verification and controls around all these measures to ensure that you're experiencing the savings and benefits that you should be. And just by way of history, Dalkia, formerly known as Groom Energy, was acquired by a large energy company called EDF about 3.5 years ago. And we actually were acquired by an affiliate of EDF called Dalkia. And so in October, we took on our parent company's name, and which is why we now refer to ourselves as Dalkia. But within the group here in the US, EDF has a couple of other great businesses that have become our sister partners. And so when we kind of look at the hub and spoke here, we have a variety of affiliate companies that can help us with any solution that you might need. And so our focus here at Dalkia is on behind the meter solutions for any way your buildings touch energy. So we really try to have the entire kind of solution set for any way that your buildings might be consuming energy. And where we need to, we tap into our sister companies. So our other affiliates here in the US include EDF Energy Services, which is a retail energy supplier. So they supply commodity energy and gas in any of the deregulated markets in the country. So we can supply that kind of retail power to the building in addition to just trying to reduce your energy consumption. We have a sister company, EDF Renewables, which builds large solar and wind farms, and they actually acquired a company called Enter Solar, which is really good at portfolio rooftops. And so we pull them in on some projects. And we have within Dalkia, Aegis Energy was acquired shortly after Groom, and they're a combined heat and power provider. And then we do some of these measures ourselves in-house too within Dalkia. So depending on the size of the project, we can be helpful on solar and storage, HVAC work, LED, and I'll get into those measures further. So this is our team. We haven't gotten together like in person like this in a while, but we have about 100 people. This is at one of our annual team meetings. And really the makeup of our team here at Dalkia is we have a lot of engineers that do project design, project management, and project implementation work. So we really think of ourselves as an EPC, which is an engineering, procurement, and construction company. But again, very much focused on any of the ways that your buildings consume energy and finding ways to reduce that. So this slide just gives you an overview of kind of some of the services that we provide. My team deals with all the non-lighting ones. And the reason that I'm the one here talking to you about financing is that when you get out of LED lighting, some of these solutions can be much more capital intensive. And so the need for financing tends to be higher when you start talking about cogen or solar or some of these other things. And so I personally come out of a background, I've been in the solar industry since 2001. Was a founder at a rooftop solar company where we focused on a lot of Fortune 500 solar rollouts for people like FedEx, Target, Kohl's, Walgreens, a lot of real estate investment trusts. And probably half of our business there was financed because solar is so capital intensive. So having been in the industry real long, I've had a lot of exposure to project financing. And we're now implementing that across our kind of broad solution set here at Dalkia. So just to kind of keep moving, the next thing I wanted to touch on is, why do people need to consider zero capital solutions? And you may have noticed that we don't use the F word in this presentation. Oftentimes when you're going to kind of pick up on what these solutions are, and people use the word financing, but oftentimes that has connotations within a business that are negative. And a lot of these solutions behave very differently from a tax perspective and from an accounting perspective. So our goal today is that you leave this webinar with a better understanding of the options that are out there and how they might be good fits for your business, or where and when they might be good fits for your business. But I wanted to show you two examples here In this first example, we kind of compare a customer that decides to use a zero capital solution as opposed to the kind of typical barrier that we run into is, well, we have a certain budget cycle and our next budget cycle is a year from now. So let's talk about a project and then we'll go try to get it approved and then we can implement it in a year. And in this case, had they looked for a zero capital solution to sort of bypass that product, they would have started to achieve the savings of the project, and the capital option that they waited for actually never catches up in this model. So we recognize that there's a lot of reasons that people might decide, we only want to use capital. And oftentimes they don't like zero capital or financing solutions because they think that it might go against their borrowing base or show up as debt or be on their balance sheet. And there's a lot of objections. But fundamentally, if you're looking to save money and be a more profitable business, sometimes these options achieve that goal better than waiting for your capital cycle. Here's another example where similarly the customer sort of contemplated a rollout period where we're going to deploy a certain amount of capital each year over the next 5 years, and we'll kind of roll this out over some period of time. And again, had they decided, what, let's just go do, these are good projects, they have good NPVs, they generate savings, and they make us a more profitable business. If they decided to do it up front, they would have made more money over that term. And the waiting approach of we're going to wait and allocate capital over some period of time just never catches up to the benefits of moving quickly. So just sometimes that's a different way of thinking about it. And companies think, well, we have plenty of cash, we don't need to use these types of solutions. But the reality is it's not always that easy to get cash in a short amount of time within a large organization. This does require, if there's a downside to it, it does require a longer term engagement. So, if you put up capital, we go in or your vendor goes in and builds a project for you, and it's sort of a very finite period of time, whereas these types of transactions, are several year contracts, and sometimes that's an adjustment for businesses that aren't used to doing that. A few customers that do finance projects and do finance energy projects, meaning they are customers for financing, include even Bank of America. So places that clearly have access to capital still go out and finance projects for some of these reasons where moving quickly has advantages. And we worked with one of our customers is Iron Mountain, and we've done a number of projects for them with a performance contract structure, and we'll get into those structures kind of next. So these are some of those barriers that we've talked about. Capital is reserved for core business. So sometimes energy projects or HVAC updates and things like that don't fall into that. There's concerns about a CFO or accountant not looking favorably upon taking on these types of structures because it might go against your borrowing base or negatively impact your leverage and debt ratios within the business. And other times it's just capital constrained, and capital goes to things that are super critical. So sometimes, what broke or what do we think is really going to break this year? And that's the extent of it. So these solutions have the potential to solve all of those problems. And really my goal today, like we're not a biased party in how you approach these projects. We just want our customers to understand the variety of options that are out there. If ultimately our customers want to purchase a project, we're very happy to go that route. But I think a lot of times there's a lack of clarity around these things, especially within people that sort of don't do financing day in and day out. The industry is designed to be maybe unnecessarily complicated, and they use a lot of terms and jargon that don't always translate. And so we want to make it super clear kind of when these structures are the right fit. So today I'm going to cover 4 kind of basic categories. And again, my hope is if you haven't done a lot of project financing, you're going to come out of this with just a better sense of when and why some of these structures make sense for you as a customer. Within this table, at the left end of the spectrum, we have simple leasing, which a lot of times when you talk about leasing, people, their only experience is car leasing, and that's really quite different than business leasing of equipment. So sometimes you have to sort of put aside your experience with maybe setting up a car lease, because at the end of that, your car goes back to the dealer, and that's not always the case in a lease. Really, a simple lease is oftentimes structured like a loan, although sometimes there is sort of a balloon payment or um, a possibility of giving things back at the end. But simple leasing tends to be kind of the simplest possible structure, and oftentimes carries the lowest interest rates in the market because of that simplicity. But the trade-off for that is that you're kind of fully on the hook for a set of fixed payments. It's a very universal solution that you can do almost anywhere. At the far right hand of the table, you have the opposite end of the spectrum, which is efficiency as a service, or any kind of performance or service contract. So we use the term efficiency as a service, but really when people talk about service agreements, that's kind of the same as a performance contract. There's going to be teeth in that agreement that tie the performance to the provider. So as the customer, you're not always on the hook for that, but there is a financing cost to that. So again, the leasing is going to tend to have a lower interest rate, and the efficiency as a service is going to tend to have a little bit higher interest rate, but sometimes it's worth it because of the benefits that you get out of that, and sort of pushing responsibility off to the experts and to let them do what they do. And then you have a couple of unique options in the middle that we'll cover as well. One is PACE financing, which is property assessed clean energy. And these are programs that you have to basically be legislated within your state and then oftentimes rolled out locally through your municipality. So there are some limitations on that, but we'll get into greater detail on that. And then the last one is on-bill financing, which is something that we've developed with one of our sister companies, actually. And the idea with that structure is that we would bill the energy efficiency improvements just as a simple line item on what you think of as your utility bill. But in these deregulated markets where our sister company can supply you electricity or gas, we would take over your retail energy contract competitively, of course, and then you would have a line item for your lighting measures or whatever other upgrades we might be doing for you. So there's a great deal of simplicity within that structure. All of these things can be cash flow positive potentially. All of them can work across a wide variety of measures, but there are some pros and cons to each, and that's really the focus of what we're talking about today. And we're going to keep moving. We only have 13 minutes left, so I'm going to move fast. One thing that is maybe somewhat important to understand is the whole market loves to talk about service agreements and performance contracts. And when we set out at Dalkia to find partners for these, what we found is that everyone says they have a service agreement, but if you really look at the requirements, both from a tax perspective with the IRS, as well as from an accounting perspective in the new FASB rules, many of the products in the market do not sort of check the boxes necessary to truly be a service agreement. So this is an area where I think we can be helpful to you. I've got a link to a great article here that we can post. And really, there's a whole bunch of checklist items that you have to achieve in order for these things to qualify as service agreements, if that's important to you. And the benefits of it being a service agreement can be sort of a transfer of risk potentially, but also the potential for off-balance sheet treatment where it's truly an OpEx. And so that's something that can be important for some customers. So again, at the simple end of the spectrum, we have leasing. Typically, these structures will have no upfront cost. You will have a fixed payment that, hopefully all these things work, but you're going to make that payment regardless. And there's ways to mitigate that, of course, through warranties and maintenance. But you're going to be making a fixed guaranteed payment over some period of time. Could be a couple years, sometimes as much as 8 or even 10 for really, really good credit. The costs are very low on these. They're not performance based. Typically, you would be the owner of the equipment after the term. So after the 8 years are up, you've completely paid for it and it is yours. Under those new rules that I referenced, operating leases do not qualify typically for off-balance sheet treatment. So that's why I'm not covering that today, is that the operating lease, although it can be a useful tool, if you're trying to achieve off-balance sheet, it's no longer a useful tool because it no longer qualifies. So we're going to just call it simple leasing for now. The second is PACE financing. So this is a really interesting one. It's a little bit niche because you have to be in a market that allows PACE financing. But it turns out that most of the markets where electricity is high and energy efficiency projects have the best returns have a tendency to also allow for PACE. So in the Northeast market, there are some good markets. We expect Massachusetts to come on this year. California is a great market, and there's a lot of markets in between. I'll show you a map in a moment. But again, no upfront cost, fixed payments. One of the great things here is that you can stretch the term out for as much as 20 years. So you can really maximize cash flow on these, where your payments are low and your benefits are high. The cost of the financing is typically low. These are typically not performance based. You would own the equipment afterward. And it's interesting, if you kind of Google whether PACE is on balance sheet or not, you have maybe a hard time finding a lot of information on it. But I think there's an interesting perspective here, because the way that PACE is billed to you is it comes in on your property tax bill. So there's still a third-party lending institution, but all of the billing happens on the property tax bill. So it is not attached to your corporate credit. It's attached to the real estate, and the real estate becomes the collateral for the loan. So if you were to move out of your building in 5 years, even on a 20-year PACE deal, you can leave and your company would have no further obligation to pay that bill. It stays with the real estate. So whoever buys or moves into that building would take on the PACE obligation. And they're designed to be cash flow positive, so it should only be a good thing for whoever inherits it. But it allows you to go very long on the financing and to kind of disassociate the financing from your corporate credit. So we've had customers that had like an LLC, a special purpose entity, set up to own a single building. And so there really wasn't a lot of credit there, but the building had a lot of value, and PACE was a good solution for that type of customer. So the next is on bill. So here you can kind of see an example of an EDF electricity invoice. So this is, in any market where you have a deregulated energy supply, EDF can supply natural gas or electricity. And then we've arranged a program with them called E-Efficiency. And within that program, the lighting or whatever measures just show up as an additional line item. So the premise here is that your net bill every month should stay the same or go down. Although you are sort of paying for those costs over time on the bill, it's reducing your energy consumption. So your net bill would be designed to go down. The payments would be fixed. You would not have to pay anything up front. Can go out to as much as like 5 years. It sort of is dependent on how long you want to go on your electricity contract. If you're in a 5-year electricity contract, then we can do the E-Efficiency offering for up to 5 years. So there's some flexibility there. These are typically not performance based. The cost of capital is relatively low, and you would end up owning the equipment at the end. At this point, we have not set this up to be a performance or a service contract, and so our expectation is that your accounting team would decide that that is on balance sheet. So then the maybe most interesting solution, and the one that people talk about a lot, are the as a service contracts. So this is efficiency as a service. These are great because you basically only pay for benefits. You're not paying a fixed fee. You can pay it out over a fairly long contract. In the solar world, this is very similar to a power purchase agreement. And one of the vendors that we work with on these actually structures their deals very much like a reverse PPA, where you actually pay for negative kilowatt hours. So you're billed on a per kilowatt hour saved basis, very similar to how you would be on a solar PPA, where you're paying per kilowatt hour of generation. So it's a great structure. You're relying entirely on the vendor to deal with speccing the equipment, maintaining the equipment. And so it's really nice. And if you have a need to have the financing or the as a service contract be off balance sheet, that has the potential to be achieved here. So you're pushing all the risk to the provider, and therefore this does not have to show up as debt on your balance sheet. We are not your tax counsel, so you're still going to need to kind of vet that out internally and with your consultants. But these are generally thought to be off balance sheet structures as long as they're done correctly, and we can kind of help guide your team through that. So I'm going to move on. The map that we're showing here is basically just an overview of where some of these solutions are available. So unlike the as a service and the leasing, which you can basically do just about anywhere in the country, PACE is geographically focused, as well as our on-bill e-efficiency solution, because that has to be in a deregulated market. If we can't serve electricity or gas to you because you're still in a regulated state like Georgia, for example, then we're not able to do that on-bill financing. But in a lot of states where electricity is expensive and these types of projects have really great economics to begin with, in most of those states, both of these products are good options. And this isn't exactly a comprehensive list, but you can kind of get an idea. And then the caution that I have on PACE, and even with the on-bill to some extent, is that these aren't all governed on a state, but it's actually more granular than that. The local municipalities tend to have to approve these things. Or if you're in a deregulated state, but you sit within a municipal electric, we may not be able to do on-bill. But we are working on a project right now where it's a municipal electric, but we can serve gas to the project, and so we can do the on-bill financing as part of the gas deal. So usually in these colored states, there's a way to get it done. So I think the point, hopefully, I know it's pretty quick, and if you've never really been involved in project financing, that might be a bit of a fire hose. I'm not sure. But I think the message that we want you to understand is there are a lot of solutions. Some of them are better than others at doing certain things. So we really try to look at each project to figure out what are the goals of the company, what are the goals of the project, how do they think about accounting issues and what's important, and then sort of pick the best solution for the project and for the customer. And then typically procedurally, if you were to do one of these zero capital solutions through us, we can usually do an initial proposal quite quickly, and then of course that is subject to credit review, or in the case of PACE, it might be subject to a review of the property value. And then we would come back with kind of a final tightened up proposal where we're firm on the payments and that sort of thing. So it's a fairly straightforward process depending on the measure, especially for something like lighting where it's really easy to kind of budget that out quickly. So we're doing that currently, and happy to follow up with anybody that has interest in that. Here's our contact information. Again, we're pretty unbiased on how you approach projects. We find a lot of times customers don't know about all the options, so hopefully that's helpful in giving you a sense of the financing options that are out there. And I encourage you to follow up with Katie or I if we can help you out with a particular project. So thank you everybody for your time.